All right, well, we might get started because I'm conscious everyone has very busy schedules. And I'll just kick off with some housekeeping anyway, just so that the latecomers do have time to join. So, firstly, everybody, my name is Sia Kupritzis, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at With You With Me. And I'm joined on the call today by Gina Mybush, the Chief Research and Development Officer at the Art of Mentoring. And we are both really happy to have you here today as we explore a topic I think that is front of mind for many leaders today, which is exploring how we can start to future-proof the workforce amidst the constant background of change that we're seeing around the market today. So just before we officially kick off, I'll let you know that we are going to record this session so that we can circulate a copy and a recording to you and anyone who couldn't make it. So we'll hit go on that. In terms of what you can expect today from an agenda perspective, we have you for the hour and we're going to make sure it's a very, very full and productive hour. I'll start kicking things off with a bit of an introduction into what skills-based workforce management is and why it's suddenly on the radar for so many organisations in terms of finding and closing skills gaps. And we're then going to explore some strategies for bridging skills gaps. And Gina is going to take us through a look at the role that mentoring plays in these strategies before welcoming some truly extraordinary panelists who you can see on the screen here from Amazon Web Services and BAE Systems, to share how their organisations are thinking about skills, mentoring, and really tackling these workforce challenges. If you do have questions throughout, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We have a team who'll be monitoring those and answering as we go, or we can circle back to those at the end. And certainly through the panel discussion, we encourage you to do the same as well. As Gina mentioned, I do see a lot of familiar names on here, which is great, but also some newcomers. So before we kick off, Gina and I might give you a quick introduction into who we are and our organisations. So Gina, we might start with you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Sia. It's great to be here. And as I said, and Sia mentioned, lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So Art of Mentoring, we've been around for pushing toward 20 years now and are going through lots of growth and change. But basically, we're in the business of connecting people. So we help organisations to create mentoring programs to connect people up for learning. Each program we do is tailored to the customer's business needs. So we really want to make sure that we're helping our clients to reach their business goals with the program. And I guess what we bring to the table that's really important, I think, is expertise in mentoring, not only being a mentor or a coach, which many of us are accredited and practiced experience to do, but the idea of understanding how to manage big programs, small programs, tailored to the size and the needs of the organisation. So we love what we do. We keep a good track on what's the cutting edge research in mentoring and coaching and bring those things in there so that we can make sure that organisations can grow. They can grow their people, their new leaders, their newcomers, hand knowledge down from the more experienced people to the younger people, all sorts of different connections that are really great. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today about the experience they've had and their thoughts around the role that mentoring might bring in that skills arena that Sia is going to mention to you. So I'll hand it back to Sia to talk about With You With Me. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gina. And yes, just a bit on With You With Me. So we are a global HR tech company that works with organizations to solve the skills challenge end to end. So we have a tech platform that organizations use to create dynamic skills frameworks that outline pretty much the skills that their organization will need to achieve their objectives at both an enterprise and a role level. And then we map their existing workforce to show what capabilities are already in place. And then once we've got that powerful data, it provides that view on how to close the gap through either hiring, targeted upskilling, or through things like mentorship programs, which is how we work very closely with the Art of Mentoring and why we wanted to bring our collective groups here today. The other aspect of our program, I think, that I'll touch on quickly that is quite exciting is we don't just assess current skills, we also identify potential to pick up new skills. So our platform predicts the skills individuals will not only excel at, but enjoy, which really helps when you're building out these personalized professional development and growth plans for individuals. So now that you know who we are, we can get stuck into it. And I'd like to start by setting the scene on why we're here. So we all know and we all hear constantly that the world of work is changing and it is causing systemic productivity issues for most organizations. And I expect that's why many of you are here today. In most organizations, you'll find this idea of the skills gap isn't just an HR problem anymore. It's becoming a critical business risk that's discussed right up to the board level. And with the rise of things like generative AI and digital transformation, the skills required to perform most roles are evolving faster than organisations can keep pace with. So when we have all of this rapid change, I think everyone's focus is really on how we can prevent the inevitable skills workforce gaps from occurring and how we can keep our people and our teams motivated and engaged and really growing in the direction a company needs. And this is really the problem that has driven the widespread adoption of skills-based workforce management. So I'd like to dig into a concept many of you may already be familiar with, certainly those of you who've worked in the tech space before, which is the notion of the skills half-life. And it's a way of thinking that really underpins the way that we like to think about skills management and employee growth. It's essentially a measure used to describe how long a specific skill remains useful or relevant before it starts to become outdated. So as an example, if a skill has a half-life of 5 years, that means in 5 years, about half of the knowledge or abilities related to that skill will need to be updated, refreshed, or replaced to stay relevant. And as you can see on the right, the half-life of skills is getting shorter and shorter. And that's because of this incredible acceleration of technology that we're seeing, particularly things like AI. And the average worker today is going to need to reskill roughly 9 times to remain relevant throughout their career, and those with the most fungible or replaceable skills as frequently as every 3 years. So for context, this rate of change is only expected to continue increasing, and by 2030, we're looking at a skill half-life as short as 2 years. And I wanted to start by explaining this skills half-life view, as it is one of the primary factors that is contributing to the national skills shortage. And it's a problem that traditional training approaches weren't really designed to address to solve. So we need to be thinking about how our people and how our workforces can evolve differently through the lens of this new skills problem. Now, I've popped some stats up on the screen that illustrate that broader landscape, but I want to highlight the first one in particular, which is the fact that we're now in a world where almost all corporate roles require some form of digital skills. We know technology is becoming increasingly accessible and it's impacting more roles. And an example I'd like to refer to here is a project that we recently did with the Australian Army, and it was looking at the impact of automation and augmentation on the Army's workforce over the next 15 years. And through that research, we found that almost 50% of the entire workforce will be affected by both automation and augmentation. More than 20% of all roles are expected to interact with augmented technology, so people need to be building new skills, and that's going to present a 30% capacity gain for the workforce. So basically, more than 50% of Army's workforce is going to need to upskill to be able to use new technologies as part of their existing roles, or to reskill into other areas in the instances where parts of their roles have been automated. And I can guarantee you this is not just a scenario that's isolated to defence. It's happening in different scales across all of our organisations. So we really need to start getting serious about understanding what the skills gaps are, what we have coming in terms of skill need, and which learning and development strategies are the best way to build the technical and the soft skills that are going to support our workforces in the right direction. So to summarise some of those current challenges, we're at a point where having a formal plan and approach to solving the end-to-end skills challenge in organisations is no longer a nice-to-have secondary consideration for a business. It's a core strategic imperative that will underpin an organisation's ability to thrive in an increasingly volatile market. So as HR leaders, we often have the question, where do we start in moving our organisations in the right direction here? And I think the very first step is starting to shift thinking, both our own thinking, but also, taking that into our organisations to inspire a different way of thinking about the problem. And I've popped some of the examples up here. We need to adopt an agile, growth-orientated mindset about career pathways in and around a business over that traditional linear career progression mindset. We need to stop thinking about the skills gap and start thinking about reducing skills lag. A gap is a finite defined state of being that we know will not remain static in this constantly shifting world. Roles and skills are constantly going to be evolving, so we need to start to think of plans and continuous learning, development, evolution that keep people constantly moving forward to reduce the lag. We need to be thinking about creating a dynamic skills-based ecosystem within our organization that matches employees to task requirements. This idea of right person, right skills, right time over a mindset of fixed jobs, roles, functions, and filling position vacancies. We have to look to targeted career development based on the up-to-date needs of the organisation. So it's not necessarily the way that we've previously approached professional development, which might be what the employee wants to do or what they're interested in, but instead looking at how we can bring the two together, the organisation and the individual, so that they can grow in the same direction. And finally, when closing those skills gaps, we need to be considering the spectrum of tools and people available to us to do this. It's not just about putting someone on a training course or looking to a cookie cutter picture of what a role model, mentor, or leader should be to grow a team member. Instead, we really need to take that personalized, tailored pathway approach and seek diverse experiences and perspectives to guide this growth and agility. So I think the natural starting point for an organisation is starting to shift to this skills-based view. And there are two parts we're really going to drill into today. How do you get a view of the skills you have versus the skills you need? And then how can you build that capability to bridge the gap and move forward in the direction you need in a really meaningful and effective way? So first up, starting with how an organisation can get ready for the skills-based approach and implement actionable, practical steps to have their people keeping pace with the skills that they need. We've seen a workforce skills-based model deliver significant value and ROI across enterprises. Benefits, include everything from reducing the cost of hiring through to building engagement, retention, improving internal mobility. The key to achieving these benefits is ensuring you have skills as a thread throughout that end-to-end employee life cycle. And we use a process to do this called the 3 C's: clarity, capability, and closure. And I'll put this slide up here because I think it articulates it quite well. The first step to achieving clarity on the skills needed to execute an organization's strategy successfully is building a skills framework, or at least thinking of your role and your people through that skills-based lens. It's a shift from the traditional qualification or competency model that typically determines someone's suitability for a role based on their previous experience. So a great place to start is creating a skills framework, which may sound complex if your organization has not done that before, but it can be as simple as translating traditional job descriptions into skills. So both technical skills that are needed to execute on that role, but also those all-important soft skills that are required in the workforce. And having that as a universal language across your organization so your people can have real clarity over where their skills are for their specific needs and their specific roles, but also how that might look if they looked into different pockets of the business, as opposed to having a really niche, nuanced view of what they do. And looking at the workforce in this way provides your leaders with a view of the capability they need to achieve their department or the organizational goals, but it also provides a really clear, succinct signal to employees about the skills that they need to build for their roles. Once you've got that view, we then move on to the capability piece. So assessing capability. What are the skills your organization has versus what are the skills your current employees actually have? And there are many ways you can go about doing these kinds of assessment. There's lots of different solutions in the market, but we typically recommend a combination of employee self-assessment coupled with a manager verification. And this dual approach really ensures a consensus on the real state of play in terms of existing capability. And it's also where we believe that understanding employee potential, which I mentioned at the start, really comes into play as well. What are the skills that your people would naturally thrive at learning? It's a valuable perspective because it means not only can you understand where the quick wins are in terms of directing someone to upskill to perhaps fill a critical void, but also a really powerful motivational tool for the individual. If we can understand cognitive ability, learning preference, and psychometrics, we can map this to skills to understand what someone will enjoy learning, how they will best learn, and give them some quick wins in terms of closing the skills gap, which is really, really important for motivation. It also opens their minds as to the other areas of the business they could move in that they may not have worked in previously, but they can finally see that they might have a natural affinity to learn the skills for those additional roles. And that brings me to the last part of the process, which is closure, where you can start to put very personalized and targeted plans in place to close the skills gap with your people, either for their current positions, if there is a gap, or even for future positions or business requirements. So what is that role for the future? What is that next role? How do the teams need to evolve? And what closure plans can you put in place to move them in that right direction? So just to quickly show you how all of that pieces together across that end-to-end skills view, here is a view of a skills-based workforce process in action as it relates to the organisation on one level as well as the employee. So starting off in that clarity phase, we have the organisation understanding the skill demand, so what are the skills that they need, and the individual getting real clarity around the expectation of skills for their role. We then move to capability, where we skills map the workforce, which means we now have an understanding of what the existing capabilities are and where there may be gaps or opportunities to upskill and grow. And then the closure process means we've identified the gaps that need to be addressed and start to build a strategy for how we can address it. Now, there are many different strategies that may be deployed to address closure. It might be hiring new talent in, it might be implementing internal mobility between departments. Do we grow the existing workforce through learning, such as mentoring, on-the-job training, or short courses that you already have access to? Or in some cases, it may even be looking to automation to fill gaps or even restructuring. But the most important part of skills-based workforce management is you now have the data from which to make the decision around how to best close that gap. And this is how you can start to really align your HR initiatives and approaches in a more meaningful way to the organisational strategy. What are the skills that we need and what are the programs that are going to take us there? And so that you can sort of really start to understand now an end-to-end example for an organisation, we are going to delve deeper into the example of mentorship because we do have the wonderful Gina on the call who is a true expert in this space. So Gina, I will pass it over to you to walk us through your thinking on mentorship and then kick off our wonderful panel discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sia. Look, I find this a really fascinating topic to consider from the lens of mentorship. I'm going to hark back to one of the things that Sia talked about, which is this idea of shifting our thinking. And certainly when it comes from a position of mentoring, all of those points that Sia talked about were really important. Agility, putting people together and helping them to take a learning journey together, which is really what mentors and mentees do, is a really agile way of upskilling, I guess, the more junior person. And when I say upskilling, mentorship is not a teaching relationship. We talk about putting two people together with the intent of helping one of them take a journey into understanding themselves better, understanding how they fit into the organisation, what they can bring, and what they need to do to get there. And we're thinking a lot about this at Art of Mentoring. So that agility, because you're providing one-on-one, personalised, tailored, if you like, guidance for the more junior person, we're certainly ticking the box when it comes to agility. It's also a very quick process. You're getting that on the job, instant, month by month or however frequently they're getting in contact. The mentee is learning and developing and adjusting their learning pathway with the guidance of their mentor. So you don't have that lag. You're not having to wait for the mentee to complete an entire, sort of learning pathway before they're actually able to go back, apply things in the workplace, come back and speak to their mentor and adjust. The whole idea of it being targeted, I think, is one that's really quite unique to mentoring as well. And I often say when we implement a mentoring program, what we're in fact doing is turbocharging the learning and development resources of that organisation, because each mentee gets a personalised one-on-one coach, mentor to help them through their journey. And I think the final point that Sia made about shifting our thinking is that idea of getting different and diverse perspectives. Sometimes in mentoring, we think that mentors have to come from the field of expertise of the mentee to offer value. But in fact, we find that the opposite is often true. Similarities help a mentor and mentor to connect. So being in the same industry, maybe working for the same organisation, maybe having some shared experience the mentee wants that the mentor's already had, they allow people to connect. But it's the differences working in different business units, coming from different points of view, that really helps the mentee to go through an accelerated learning process and also to change their perspective. So, you know, we find that this approach of creating connections within organisations, across organisations, you know, really is a powerful way of giving each mentee an opportunity to get new perspectives, learn those, not just embedding their hard skills, but learning those soft skills, the things that you can't learn in a classroom environment, in a very powerful, very cost-effective, very impactful way. So if you could move on to the next slide for me, Sia. Sorry, back one. Is there another one before that? Sorry, not, yeah, the one with the list on, sorry. So we're talking about the outcomes there. I didn't see that you'd already moved on. We talk about the outcomes that we can achieve through that, and that acceleration, that nimbleness, that tailored means that a person can grow their career within and really without the outside the organisation. And I do get feedback occasionally that people within organisations that grow their people through mentoring don't mind so much that they're helping the mentee to move on in their career, potentially even to another organisation, because you know, people's well-being at work, their happiness in what they're doing, their feeling that they're developing and growing and that their employer is supporting them is something that is really positive that comes out of mentoring. So it accelerates people's career growth. It helps them to be really engaged and feeling loyal to their organisation that's looking after them. The junior leaders get an opportunity to learn a lot of those things that are hard to teach in a classroom in coursework, so that they can step up into those leadership positions. Sometimes the role of the mentor is to champion, give them a little push. And we see that a lot in organisations where, you know, emerging leaders might be a bit hesitant to step forward, but their mentor's giving them that little bit of encouragement and self-confidence to move forward. We're talking about promoting and diversity and inclusion. So mentoring has a pretty special role to play in this area, particularly because mentors are affected by mentoring as well. We find a lot of mentors come back from a mentoring relationship thinking, I've got a completely different perspective on the experience of different people with different lives and different backgrounds to me. A lot of mentoring programs try to match people across boundaries of different groups, different backgrounds, cultural, linguistic diversity, gender, all of those sorts of things. And that one-on-one contact not only helps the mentee to navigate their path in the organisation or in their career, but helps the mentor to appreciate and become a different kind of leader. Productivity, of course, we see from the positive well-being benefits that come from mentoring, but also being able to understand how to be nimble within the organisation, how things get done within the profession. So there's a lot of benefits for individuals and for the organisations coming from mentoring programs. We love structured mentoring programs, but to be honest, informal mentoring is also a mindset that we love to see, you know, infused throughout organisations. And when I speak to our lovely panellists, if you could move on, see to the next slide, I know that they're going to be able to relate to you stories of and experiences of where mentoring has had that kind of effect on people. So I would love to introduce you to our two wonderful panelists. I've had some great conversations with both of them earlier this week. Matthias Otte has contributed to learning and development strategy and execution at the sort of executive level in Australia and internationally for more than 25 years. So he's worked with Deloitte Consulting, Bupa, Korn Ferry, EY, Accenture, and now Amazon Web Services. Hi, Matthias. If you're able to turn your camera on, that would be great to see you. I know he's currently very interested in the growth of AI and the impact that this has on the world of work, and I guess the world in general. That's the really interesting conversation. A couple of days ago, we had an absolutely mind-expanding conversation about this very topic, and I can't wait to continue that in just a moment. Monique, I'm also delighted to welcome and to introduce Monique Thompson, who also has international experience, more than 3 decades, in fact, in identifying skills, needs, and to help close those gaps through talent identification and recruitment. So Monique's worked for Holden, Executive Careers, Thompson & Thompson, Hudson and Beyond Bank, and is now at the fantastic organisation at BAE Systems Australia. And I say the fantastic organisation because they are clients of Art of Mentoring, and I've been working with Monique for a couple of years now on that program, where she's been building on this really powerful coaching and mentoring presence within that organisation. So I'm proud and excited to share with you the experience that she's had leading to a culture shift in BAE Australia, where people communicate and work and collaborate and even move across boundaries that has really positive rewards for themselves and for their business. So just for everyone in the audience, if you did have any questions for Matthias and Monique while we're speaking, please pop them in the chat box and we will pass them on at an appropriate time and make sure that we get those questions answered if we can. But firstly, I'd like to ask Matthias to join me and ask that question about the skills gap in AI that you're foreseeing or you're seeing already and foreseeing. Matthias, how are you going and what does that look like for you? Why is that of interest to you?
Hi, Gina. Thanks for having me. I hope you can see me now because I look happily at myself, which is not very pleasant, to be honest. But anyways, see, AI skills gap is a big topic, right? And I'm working with a lot of CIOs, CTOs to determine how do we best address the skills that they need to build to keep their workforce afloat and prepared for what we see coming from an AI ML perspective at the moment. Now, when I work with CIOs, CTOs, naturally the inclination is to look at tech skills, right? So we need programmers, we need people who understand deep learning, prompt engineering, who have Python experience, and then obviously all, given that they work for AWS, all the cloud services that we use and how to orchestrate them. However, often when I look a bit broader, what I also see is there's like soft skills missing, right? So we are talking about ethics, problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, project management. Now, these are all the skills that are more prevalent when we look at AI ML. So just saying ethics, we all heard probably about ethical AI. How many open positions have you seen on LinkedIn for an AI ethics supervisor, trainer, whatever, right? How many advertisements have you seen, job adverts have you seen that ask for critical thinking? Honestly, I haven't seen many of those. Now, when I look at the skills like critical thinking, problem solving or problem finding, that would be the problem, because the problem solving is what the AI does for us, right? So now we are from tomorrow on all problem oriented and look for the problems that the AI should help us to solve. Ethics, AI, adaptability, there's at least 3 skills that Korn Ferry in their leadership architect, which is their global competency framework, would classify as having a high developmental difficulty. That means you don't hire the stuff in the market. It's hard to find. And if you need to develop it, it takes you some time. And I can tell you, when I worked for EY, I was coached to some of our deputy secretaries and CEOs and government, coaching them on ethical decision making. It's hard work. Yeah, and unbelievable what gets in the way of a good, very ethical decision. I think the skills gap, what I also researched, so AWS and Access Economics commissioned a bit of research in the past. Interestingly, and Alicia, it's so good to meet you. I feel like you were the missing part in my life up to today. It says 73% of employers don't know how to implement AI training. So here we sit and we say, AI will have a massive impact on workforce and how we do business. Plus, this thing is evolving at a rate of 12 to 18 months. There's a new iteration of AI coming out, and 73% of companies do not have training or don't know how to devise training and develop it. 75% of employers can't find the talent in the market they are looking for. It's, I think, Alicia, you had a similar number when I looked at it. Often people, Alicia also talked about people going and understanding their skills. So I talk about skill adjacency, understanding with the skill set you have, what other jobs can you actually do, because the skill configuration is relatively close to what you do. Many companies I worked with in the past and now have no idea what skill adjacency means and how to determine it. So they can't shift talent they have already in-house into the right positions. So that's all about this skills gap and what it means for us. I think we need to get on top of this topic very, very quickly. Otherwise, we fall behind, really behind.
Matthias, when we talked the other day, you mentioned to me that it needs to be a really deliberate and intentional process, closing this gap. What do you think is the impact if we fail to do it intentionally? Like if we fall into the situation of having the technological focus on filling this gap rather than these other sorts of skill sets that you're talking about. What are we heading for if we don't do it deliberately and intentionally?
So I just mentioned, so I don't know how familiar you all are with OpenAI. These are the ChatGPT guys, right? So OpenAI released a framework of the development of AI. It has 5 levels, and it starts with the conversational AI, which we are all using at the moment. That's level 1. Level 2 are called the reasoners. This is what we are embarking. So if you use the new ChatGPT 01 model, that's a reasoner. It gives you a reason why it gave you an answer and why the choice it recommends is the best choice. These things have PhD level knowledge. So now you have a coworker who is a PhD. So the question is, how do you best leverage that? How do you make it your own? How do you harvest all this knowledge that sits in your fingertips with being critical, because these things still have bugs, right? And they still tend to hallucinate every now and then. So that means they give you wrong answers, or they make stuff up on the fly, including patient records, by the way, in recommendations. So that's a nasty side effect of it. But I think if you fall behind developing the skills, it will have a real impact on your bottom line, because you fall behind in innovation and you fall behind in productivity. And the gap is getting bigger very, very fast. And that relates to the innovation rate of AI and ML, which is about 12 to 18 months. We see a complete new generation of AI and ML coming out. The next level, so we are introducing with level 2, the reason is we are also introducing agents, which are basically AI that can handle a lot more complex prompts and requests sequentially. And then we are going into a level 3 of AI, which will be able to run entire departments. So this is the pace of innovation we are looking at. Falling behind in skills development, in skills, and Alicia, I hope you agree, and Monique as well. You don't develop skills overnight. It's not done by plugging someone into a 3-day training and they come out and magically they have skills and experience under their belt. So, and this is, I think, where mentoring plays a very, very valuable role as well in skills development, and a very deliberate role, which is often overseen in L&D settings.
I guess that was my next question. I've talked about mentoring being something that happens when you have people connecting over a period of time, a number of conversations. It's nimble. It follows the needs of the person, the learner in the relationship. So is there something more you could tell me about what you think mentoring might be able to contribute to this skills development area? Have you had any experience?
Yeah, and I've seen good and bad and ugly. And usually because I worked a lot with L&D departments and HR departments, and usually L&D peeps as a sort of appendix of HR are kind of resource strapped and cash strapped, right? So you can't run everyone through a training program, and training programs are not always the answer to everything. Also, unfortunately, I researched training investments in Australia and figured out that there's a big misalignment in the billions of dollars of training that's being done, because we have a primary focus on mandatory learning rather than developing the skills that we need in the business. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is L&D is often standalone. Then you have strategic workforce planning in the organization, and you have org design. And it doesn't matter what size the organization was I worked with. These 3 things, these 3 functions were never, ever connected. And it's absolutely mind-boggling why not. Because if you redesign your org, you should do that with the future in mind, but it will also change the skills configuration. If you devise learning programs, you need to understand what you're actually training for. Yeah, strategic workforce planning should forecast the skills demand from a point of view of how does that support your strategy in the future. So if your strategy is to incorporate AI/ML, strategic workforce planning should give you an answer, including, including labor market insights. And when I say labor market insights, there is software and tools out there that can predict skills clusters forming in the market that we will see in future in forming new jobs. And this, I think, is where we need to make very deliberate use of mentoring. And what I've seen in the past is that mentoring is sort of, either it's the flavor of the day and someone comes back and says, oh, I heard something about mentoring, let's do mentoring programs, and we do a mentoring program and then it dies away. Or it's not well positioned and explained. So people get it confused with either coaching programs or some coffee roulette type meetings where you sit and have a nice chat. And it's not positioned deliberately in development programs. So it sits there somewhere, because we need to have a mentoring program, we do a bit of mentoring, but it's not used to actually be injected in the parts of the organization and with the people orchestrated that need the development and need the growth. And I think if we use mentoring a lot more deliberately as a very relevant L&D/HR development tool, we can be a lot more successful. We don't need the big resourcing from we buy content or develop content or hire coaches. I think we can be a lot more impactful in developing the skills that we need in the future. Sorry, you're on mute.
I see Monique nodding there as you're speaking. A lot of really important messages there. Thanks for sharing that. And some of those points about the better use of resources by basically dispersing some of that intent to help individual people find their way, and the types of skills that you can't inject in a great learning and development, mandatory program. You've got to be able to match what the person's discovering, learning, exploring about themselves with what the mentor can bring to them. So it's all about conversations and fluidity. Monique, thank you so much for coming along today. I'm really excited to talk with you about the program that you've got going. And as I said, I saw you nodding a lot there to what Matthias was sharing, because I know we've had some conversations about some similar topics. So can I take you a step back, thinking about the time when the mentoring program, the inception of the program at BAE, what was happening in the organisation at that time to choose to go down the path of a structured mentoring program? So what was happening? What was the pain points, the gaps, the needs, or the opportunities?
Look, I've loved listening to the conversation, because I can relate to so much of it. So we are obviously, I work for BAE Systems Australia. Not everyone knows what we do, but we're a very advanced tech-led, and I know this conversation has been around tech, defence, aerospace and security solutions company. And we have a need to really grow our workforce because we're doing some important work into the future. And I think the real need for us was to carry out some engagement with our people initially. I heard the words Korn Ferry before, we did utilise Korn Ferry to do an engagement survey, but what we found as a result of doing that survey is that individuals within the business wanted more development, and I think that was the precursor to the mentoring program. But it wasn't just mentoring that we needed to do, and as Matthew said, it's really a combination of assessing within the business a whole lot of components, and one of those is the capability gaps within the business. What we're looking at having to develop in the forward space, also looking at job architecture, capability frameworks. Mentoring was that 20% when we look at 70, 20 and 10 solutions for people's development. The 20% was one that we drilled down on. And I guess being highly involved in developing what solution we should implement, we wanted specialised help to do it because we hadn't done a lot of formalised mentoring in the past. And I think if we think about where it came about from a number of initiatives where we were going to carry out some engagement. So we want to retain our existing workforce. They're wonderful people. Not only that, they're highly skilled and hard to replace. So what we wanted to do is bring in a formal mentoring program that would enable some cross-pollination and conversation between individuals in the business. We didn't want to match people with their own areas of the business because that would be futile. We wanted to cross-pollinate. That's a form of networking. And I think running that along with a whole other lot of initiatives around owning your career. And I know we talk about solutions, but I think individuals have to drive their own development. It's really important. So owning your career and, what's that going to look like? We gave lots of, various skills to people to be able to do that. But mentoring was then the formalization of having a conversation with an individual who's had some experience and some knowledge and can offer that up to you based on a matching process. And I think the matching process was really very crucial to the success.
So, Monique, who are the key groups of people within the organisation that were involved in the mentoring? Who are you focusing both as mentees, the ones to give the assistance to, and the mentors who are stepping up to help them?
Look, it's across the whole business. So we obviously focus on maritime and defence delivery. And also we wanted to have a program that would expose everybody within that business as much as we could to mentoring. And I think when we first initially started it, we really looked to match people from all across all areas of the business. And we wanted those who were involved in trades also to be part of it because they're a very important part of our business, and we want to utilise some of those individuals who would like to potentially move from being on the tools across into the more formalised parts of the business. And I think for them that was a great initiative. But also we had no strict rules about who we were and we're not going to include. We made it enterprise-wide.
Mm-hmm. Monique, I think related to that, Laura's asked a great question. Can you speak more about the matching? Do you have a way to find the mentors inside the organisation, or perhaps find team members, I know you'll smile at this one, who don't realise that they would be a great mentor? Did you want to speak to that at all?
I will speak to it because the matching when we went out to stakeholders is the most important part of this whole initiative. If you don't have the matches right from the start, it'll fall apart and people won't be engaged in the process. So how the matching works is really we have a set of questionnaire, 2 questionnaires really, one for mentors and one for mentees. And what they do is fill that out. So when we put people together, we're not just throwing them into a bucket with anyone. We're putting them with an individual mentor who's offering what they're looking for. And I guess matching is really, really crucial. One thing about confidence, I really love that question because we had people, because we hadn't run a program like this enterprise-wide before, we had people coming in and experiencing this program for the first time, and some of those mentees really learned about what it would take to be a mentor, and in the second innings of the program came back and applied to be mentors. So I think confidence building is an incredible part of this process, and without a doubt our people did gain that. Yeah.
And look, I know you and I've had some conversations. You come from a coaching and mentoring perspective, and you and I've had some conversations about, and I guess it's the benefits of providing people with a framework, a bit of surety about the journey that they're going to take and the skills they bring to that. So it's not a matter of turning up to their first conversation saying, well, what do we talk about? How do we do this? But providing a bit of training and some guidance along the way, and basically mapping out that they're going to be spending some time together. It's not all going to happen tomorrow, that they might want to go through a goal discussion and goal setting process, and that gives some of that confidence to people to be able to take on that mentor mantle. And that idea of people coming back and having experienced it as a mentee and saying, well, I want to do this for somebody else, and I've got the capability. I've seen what the guardrails look like, and that can help me down this journey as the mentor this time. Thanks, Monique. It's brilliant to hear. So now for the really exciting bit is, what's been the impact? What sort of a feedback have you gotten from people involved? What's the business scene come out of this project that you've been doing?
So much. I think you can't put a dollar value on almost, it's so enormous on the outcome. But I think in the long run, you'll see that, you'll see productivity grow, because I think it's an engagement exercise to a degree. Without a doubt, it's building those skill sets. But I would say, and I always say this because I come from the human element, when I'm asked for data, you can't always put a price, you can't put data on everything. I think it's about engagement, and I think it's about people feeling that they're valued in terms of the business is giving them an opportunity, and that the value that that creates, it is enormous. I think it's about people understanding themselves better. So individuals understanding themselves is key. Yeah. So what do I like doing, and really discussing that and looking into the future and having a plan, having a career plan. We can't move forward unless we know where we want to be. So where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what's the gap, right? And I think this addresses that gap. And we had mentors saying things to us like, I absolutely loved learning to listen more, which I think is just brilliant. And we had the mentees bringing in and making, behavioural changes into their everyday after a few months of the program starting. So that was an illustration of the fact that they weren't only taking it on board, they were carrying out those learnings. So that was wonderful.
Yeah. And I think one of the topics we talked about fairly early on was the idea that younger people in the workforce really expect these kind of developmental opportunities to be offered. And it's such a positive thing from the organisation, giving them this really customised, benefit of somebody else's attention that's there to help them. So that there's a bit of an intergenerational thing going on there, some differences, the group of people coming up that are expecting and really valuing when they get these opportunities from their employer. Monique, thank you so much for sharing that. Alisa, I was just going to say.
Yeah, I have a question, if that's okay, Gina. I know we're running out of time, but it's actually one that I'd love to ask both panelists. And I might start with you, Matthias, because you've clearly worked with a lot of organisations on the skills challenge and the need to get ahead of the problem and prioritise workforce skills assessments and upskilling and getting ahead of the AI problem. But HR leaders are stretched. Like everyone I speak to has so many multiple conflicting priorities. There's the operational BAU stuff, there's the aspirational stuff, there's the desire to introduce programs like skills-based workforce management and to introduce mentoring and all of these programs that we know are so essential. But how do you, or what do you recommend to these leaders to position these kinds of programs within their organizations to get it onto the radar and to make it a corporate priority?
Get the leaders that you work with, hook them with what they are on the hook for. That's what I do. I usually have the first question is, okay, what's your strategy? What are you on the hook to deliver? And what's your bonus hanging off, right? Because that's where we get the people. And are you confident that your team, and I believe they all have lovely teams, but does the team have the right skills to deliver at pace and with certainty what they are on the hook for? And this is when I get 98% of people looking at the floor and like dragging their feet left and right. And I was like, yeah, probably not. And then we have a common ground to talk about, because now I help them to achieve their targets. I help them to position their team so that the team can perform, get better outcomes out of their work, more work satisfaction that they can take back, which then has repercussions into employee engagement and retention rates and so on, given the fight for IT talent and other talent that we have here. I think that's a very important thing to do. And I don't always see, and that's no critique on HR, please, but it's just like the proliferation of tasks that HR has sometimes that we lose. As HR professional, I would include me into that bucket as well. We sometimes lose the strategic imperative, right? Because the strategic imperative is now to optimize our payroll, or it's to optimize our talent pipeline or whatever. But at the end, you're working as a service provider for the business. And the business has a strategy and needs to deliver and has a problem. And if we solve this problem, you can be a lot more targeted. And finally, you get budget from the business that was never existing before.
The budget is a great point. I do know with a lot of the work that we're doing, the tech teams are normally the ones who are ready to lean in on this because the problem is right there, right now.
Yeah.
Their skills are evolving and they have budgets that contribute to these kinds of discussions. It's the broader areas of the business that may not yet feel the pain of things like AI and ethical AI, but also all of the other evolutions that are happening. But we always sort of recommend starting with a pilot exercise within a business so that you can demonstrate what it's going to look like for that organization. They can see it working in practice and they can use that to build advocacy. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Matthias. And Monique, I'm really curious for you as well, because again, I know the work that you guys do, particularly around the mentoring space, is so progressive. And the fact that you are so focused and considered in what you do is wonderful there. How do you have that conversation with your leaders and workforce to prioritize this onto busy schedules?
Look, I put myself into their diaries. I've got no choice. No, only joking. I actually just reiterate all the time that this is such a privileged experience. And I think when I reiterate, and I say this all the time, hear things like people saying, I never knew what it was like to work in operations. Well, that's progress. Someone's experiencing how hard someone else's area of work is, but they're also being exposed to that. And because we have this huge drive to build capability, others understanding other areas of the business and being exposed, and that networking is just so essential. So I think without a doubt, the senior leadership of the business is very behind these sorts of initiatives because we've got this, massive skills focus, and I think they need to be. But it's the really engaging people, making them feel valued. We will support you within your career into the future. We've got so much room to move. We've got so many jobs, we can offer up. But I think it's really, we'll take you on that journey. Establish where you want to be, and we'll take you on that journey.
That's brilliant. And I'm definitely going to be talking to you afterwards, Monique, about how we can build your coaching into our BAE program that we're doing as well. It's wonderful.
Sure.
Love it. All right. Well, I think, Gina, if we don't have any other questions, it's probably time to start wrapping up, if that works for everyone. So I did just want to sort of close with a couple of the takeaways that we've discussed in and out through the conversation today. The first one is, I use the term skills half-life, but it's this idea that we are going to need to reskill a lot more frequently across a very broad spectrum of roles. And it is going to have, as Matthias very aptly put it, a real impact on business and on bottom line. So we need to be incorporating how we're getting ahead of this problem into our forward planning and company agendas. Adopting a growth mindset, I think, is critical. It's, again, this continuous evolution, constant development, constant upskilling and growth, and really making sure that you've got a sustainable and ongoing workforce improvement plan. Starting by focusing on the skills needed for the tasks to be done. So getting that really clear picture of what do you need to do the work today, but what are we going to need to do the work tomorrow? And I use a saying a lot, don't let progress be the enemy. No, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I always flip it around the wrong way. But I think a lot of the time organizations are very focused on having a perfect solution in place from the start. I think the best place to get started is just by getting started and iterating over time to make sure that we're evolving our skills in the right direction. And finally, I think we've obviously explored some really powerful programs that are happening today at BAE, but also in other organizations around that important role that mentorship and coaching plays in that development. We hear about 70-20-10 model. We know that only so much of the skilling that takes place in the workforce is formal, and some of the most powerful growth and development programs are those led by our people. Gina, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, look, I think Matthias has actually jumped in before me. The whole idea of flexibility, being nimble and agile and personalized in that interaction between the mentor and mentee that helps the mentee to take the skills that they need tomorrow. As you said, Sia, we've got to have the skills that are at hand to embed them, to understand how they're working, what the barriers might be that the learner is having in applying those things in the workforce, particularly that very, focused, I'm in the same organisation, what's going on in BAE. The mentors almost certainly will have experienced that in the past. So, we're talking about ways that you can very effectively turbocharge the L&D dollar. So I think in terms of that business case, by providing that agile, on the spot, really responsive support from the mentor. I really agree with what Matthias has said. Be scrappy and iterate. Give it a go. Don't let perfect be the enemy of progress.
I was going to say, I think I prefer yours, Matthias. It's easier to say. Be scrappy and iterate. I always get my P's confused. So look, we'll close it there for today. I've just popped my details and Gina's details on the screen there. We love hearing from people. If you do have questions, please feel free to connect with us either via LinkedIn or email. We will send a copy of this recording and the presentation deck to everyone afterwards. And I'll also include, with your permission, Monique and Matthias, your contact details so that people can connect and continue conversations if there are more questions. So if there's nothing else from anyone, I just wanted to say thank you again to our wonderful panelists. You were so generous in sharing your perspective and experiences with this group, and to everyone for coming along today. We know an hour is a lot out of the busy days that everyone leads, and we hope you found this to be informative and thought-provoking. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.